I've begun my voyage in a paper boat without a bottom. I will fly to the moon in it.
Dear Esther is the kind of game that throws a bit of a curveball into my little corner of the internet. All the games I've featured on this show are games I can easily recommend to people where its flaws, if any, could be easily overlooked and seen as a great game. Dear Esther has a lot of merit to it, and there are a great number of things you can take away from the experience, but I can definitely see people dropping the $10 asking price, playing it, and sending me a nasty comment about their displeasure towards the game. Or for me, mispronouncing or misspelling another word. Again. College grads can retake English 1 for the first time, right? This is a game on my show that, if you want to buy, you may have to readjust your expectations. It's a recommendation with an asterisk, so it's a great game with bad things in it? Let me explain. Dear Esther isn't exactly a new game, but an HD remake of the Source Engine mod by the same name. Its writing, story, and design were all originally by British developer and teacher Dan Pitchbeck. The mod was released in 2008 as an experimental title and received critical acclaim and attention amongst both the mod community and the indie community. This original mod is still available for download through Desura and the mod database for free. From there, Dan formed the new experimental studio called the Chinese Room. He then decided to team up with artist and level designer Rupert Briscoe. He's a fellow Source Engine developer who's made games such as Nuclear Dawn and Mirror's Edge? A mainstream game? Oh well, this game is an indie then. Good night, everybody! Isn't the idea of indie cred hilarious? So Dear Esther is an experimental title where the overall idea behind the game is that it's almost pure story. It's in a first-person view with no guns, no obstacles, and no puzzles of any kind. Basically, the entire game is exploration. You walk through areas of a deserted island, or possibly deserted island, wink wink, and travel a mostly linear path while being read narration of a series of letters written to someone named Esther. The narration is performed by Nigel Carrington, who has a long history of several voiceovers and radio dramas for BBC, films, commercials, and even a few Nintendo games. His experience and talent really shines here as he gives a great performance, making the writing sing.
But I've been here, and I know, as Donnelly did, that this place is always half imagined. Even the rocks and caves will shimmer and blur with the right eyes.
The letters recall a variety of different events, from the narrator's past to the past of the actual island. The game also encourages you to go through multiple playthroughs of the game, and it does help. Through different playthroughs, you sometimes get different or randomized narration throughout your journey. And in the case of one sequence that happens in the caves that I dare not spoil in this review, you do sometimes go through a different event that helps flesh out the story. It definitely helps adding a little bit more value to the game, as the game is only about an hour and 15 minutes long. And the writing is where this game really shines. The narration is deliberately vague and intentionally doesn't add up as a whole. Sometimes it goes off on a complete tangent and gives out events that aren't related to what you're exploring. Or are they related?
There is no other direction, no other exit from this motorway. Speeding past this junction, I saw you waiting at the roadside, a one last drink in your trembled hands.
One of the reasons for its vague and out there style is that it wants to invite the players for their own interpretation. We never really get a clear connection to the player walking around on the island and what the narration is saying. It never really holds our hands and explains everything that's going on, which is part of the beauty of the writing. It invites the player to piece everything themselves, and at least for me, it left me with a lot of questions. Who is Esther? Who are these people described in the letters? Who are we in the game? Are we the person who wrote the letters? Are we a ghost? But the big difference between me having these questions is that it wasn't a frustrating curiosity like, oh, why would this character say this stupid thing when it makes absolutely no sense to the plot? Screw this game! It was much more of an intriguing curiosity. I found myself trying to piece together what it all meant and my own little backstory and if the island really was real or not. Another big selling point of the game is its visuals, and Briscoe's expertise and skill as a visual designer really does come through in the game. When I say you feast your eyes here, it really is, well, a feast for your eyes. There are so many visual images from this game that it could really take away after playing it. The sun setting as you're going up on the hill, slowly approaching the radio tower that's just looming in the distance, and especially the absolutely breathtaking cave sequence. There were so many times during this game where I just stopped to just look at it, just take it all in. Its use of lighting, its placing of the different things, all its little touches in the background. It's easy to see why this game is highly praised for its visual style. All of these great visuals are accompanied by the absolutely beautiful soundtrack by Jessica Curry. Whimsical, mysterious, haunting, it does an amazing job setting up the atmosphere for this world, sometimes using vocals or strings or piano or even just sound effects from the world. So I had a great deal to latch onto this game personally, but there were those who, well, aren't as enthused, but for good reason. A few reviews and criticisms have come about the game since its release, and a lot of people are citing that the most frustrating thing about Dear Esther is the lack of real interactivity. One review that got a lot of undeserved negative attention came from Destructoid.com by, Alistar Pinsoff? My apologies for your name butchering, it happens a lot on this show. One of his biggest frustrations is that there really isn't a whole lot that you can really do in the game. In fact, the only thing you really can do is observe the environment. You can't really climb over rocks or anything. Whenever you have to duck, the game does it automatically. The only thing you really can do in the game is observe and hold down the W key to move. So much so that some of the Destructoid community have labeled the game W key the game. He ultimately feels that it would have worked a lot better as a film and not so much as a video game. It's a well-written and well-researched review that I recommend you reading, after you hear my thoughts on it. And to be completely honest, I must admit I had the same reaction. Dan Pitchbeck has said that this was ultimately the point, to not oversaturate the player to get invested in the story. I would argue that within the context of the story of us not really knowing who we are or what we're supposed to be, having any kind of interactivity could have really taken away from the illusion that the player was supposed to be an open canvas. The only other rebuttal I have for the game and the review is, well, holding down the W key didn't bother me as much. I think I was a little more invested in the story, visuals, and music to the point where I could forgive its shortcomings. I felt at the end of the game thinking about the characters and the story and the plot to where I could think of my own meaning and my own interpretation. And playing it for the second time is even more rewarding. My very first reaction to the game is that I didn't really care that my hand was stuck on the W key, it's that my mind was stuck in the world. And apparently I wasn't alone here. The good news for Dear Esther is that within the first 24 hours, the game sold over 16,000 copies and made its money back within the first 5.5 hours of being released on Steam. So if you're interested in Dear Esther, you actually have two options. The original source mod is still available and is still free, but the $10 HD version in all its visual glory really is a sight to behold and worth those 10 bones. So my final word on the game is this. If you're looking for an experience with a really strong sense of writing, tone, and atmosphere, and wouldn't mind to just be there to see the sights, you're gonna love Dear Esther. But if you're looking for something that's a bit more built around the gameplay aspect and being more involved in the world, you may want to look elsewhere. This is an experiment that felt worthwhile to me, and hopefully you'll now go into it with the right expectations. A few organic gameplay things I can recommend are the Stanley Parable, another Source Engine mod, Eternally Us from Ben Chandler, the recently released Dysphoria from Anna Anthropy, or even the Silent Hill series. That's indie, right?